We all know that we're supposed to stop doom scrolling. But what are we supposed to do instead? Sit there fretting about it, thinking about it, tapping our fingers on our coffee mugs. I want to share something that I discovered when I was in a similarly complicated time. Something that has helped me deal with the world when it feels like the world has gone crazy. It's called erasure poetry. Erasure poetry is the fine art of destroying books. You take a perfectly good book that somebody put a lot of work into and you cross off most of it. Or you paint over most of it if you're feeling particularly artsy. Or if you're feeling particularly generous, like I have been apparently lately. Instead of eliminating most of the text, you highlight the text that you want to be more visible. Erasure poetry is kind of like sculpture for poets, or doing a crossword puzzle when it feels like your heart is going to explode. I first stumbled on erasure poetry during the height of the Occupy movement. The most famous person who was doing erasure poetry at the time was the writer and artist Austin Kleon. I have every single one of his books except for the book where he does erasure poetry, which is called Newspaper Blackout. He was famous for going on Tumblr and crossing off most of the New York Times and revealing the subtext underneath, though he was a little less political about it. But I actually encountered erasure poetry for the first time from Rebecca Brown, who was a guest lecturer when I was in grad school. She wrote the book American Romances, and the essay extreme reading inside, which was required reading for me, was frankly worth the entire cost of the rest of the book. I discovered both Rebecca Brown and Austin Kleon during the height of the Occupy movement. I was living in Berkeley and I found myself in this really bifurcated frame of mind. On the one hand, I was so excited that there were so many people out there saying things that resonated with me, saying things about the world that I had been thinking for years and thought that I was the only one who was thinking these things. On the other hand, when you're living through a protest movement, you also have to live. And I lived about a block away from UC Berkeley. And I had helicopters hovering over my apartment until 3 o'clock in the morning. And it was just completely chaotic. I would go to the farmer's market and not know if I was going to be caught up in a mob that was being herded up by riot police. And so I needed something to channel my attention into. I needed something other than the infinite scroll of Twitter, which we didn't understand well enough to know back then was made to be incredibly addicting and made to keep us scrolling. And while on the one hand, having this news source was necessary to possibly, if this isn't too extreme, keep me alive, because the mainstream news was not talking about what was actually happening on the ground. So I needed Twitter on the one hand, and on the other hand, it was just this constant, like, okay, you know, is there going to be some fire outside of my house right now? I don't know. And so I believe that in times like these, art can save our lives. And I have always believed that this is true. And during Occupy, I am convinced that erasure poetry did a lot to save my sanity. I went down to one of the many used bookstores that was within walking distance of my apartment. Oh, I miss it. And I picked up this very lonely, very battered copy of Salt by Pierre Laszlo. This scientific text about salt. And I just started attacking it with a Sharpie the way that I saw Austin Kleon doing. And like I said earlier, it was a deeply meditative practice. And at the end of it, I was really surprised to find that, frankly, that I had written a book of poetry. Because when I was sitting down to work on it, I was literally just scanning for words that kind of seemed to glow out of the text, and just circling them without any heed for what the text might actually be trying to say in the end. So when I opened it up after I was done with it and started to read it, it felt like I was reading a book by somebody else. And I found that it had narrative, and I found that it had characters. I had no intention of creating a story with characters. I just happened to be interested every time I saw the word saltworks and turned it into altworks. And this writer was fond of saying monopoly, and I turned it into monopoly. And it just so happened at the end of it that I took the helicopters and the riot police and the running away from very angry people from when I was coming home from the train, and I put it in this book of poetry in a place where no one would ever be able to find it. This is never going to be published unless I die and my estate decides to publish it. And even if you were to find this and read it, there are no helicopters in here. There's no madness in here. It's just singing. I opened up to the page that says, "Sing out to benefit jointly thus." What does that mean? I have no freaking clue. And yet we know, don't we? We know. So I discovered erasure poetry just as a tool for giving my mind something to do that felt marginally productive, and also put me into a calming mind space, a space in which I felt like I could rest and digest to a certain extent. But as I have gotten older, and as I have, frankly, read a little bit more political stuff, critical theory, I've learned that what I was doing was actually a little bit more meaningful than I gave myself credit for at the time. When you take an existing text and you make it your own like this, you are engaged in an inherently political act. You are pulling out subtext. You are taking something that has no space for you, and you are making space for you. There are few places on earth that have less space for me than a scientific text, let me tell you. Especially if it's got mathematical stuff in it, and this one does, which is pretty ironic considering I'm an astrologer and I deal with math all day, but that's another topic entirely. So, up until now, I haven't said anything about astrology, and I probably should have started this by saying that I'm an astrologer and writer and poet, because I'm about to bring in the astrology right now. If you're here for the politics, it was very nice to see you, and I hope you have a nice day. I am the creator of narrative astrology, and the root of narrative astrology is actually in this book. Because what I believe is that every astrological interpretation is a story. Every interpretation is a book like this. And it may or may not have you inside it or have room for you, whether the story is talking about you or not. And narrative astrology is about taking these stories and recognizing the inherent power structures inside of them and questioning them, questioning the stories, questioning the power structures, and rewriting those stories so that they reflect a world that we want to live in, and then making those stories true. If you're familiar with astrology, you may recognize this as an inherently Plutonian act, which, if you saw my chart, you would be absolutely not surprised to hear Plutonian stuff coming out of my mouth. It's a work of excavation, of exposing things that are hidden and making space, what the poet John Keats called negative capability, space for things to happen. So we're going through a time of collective grief. I'm not going to be more specific about that because I suspect that this time of collective grief is going to last for a while, and I don't want this video to date too soon. But erasure poetry is a practice for processing it all. processing what we're going through right now. And I want you to use this tool, and I want you to make it your own. And I want you to illuminate text and erase text and find the meaning and the space and the you inside of it all. I want you to share your erasure poetry. And I'm supposed to say, please use the hashtags reveal the myth, erasure poetry, narrative astrology, and Pluto in Aquarius. But I'll be honest with you, the number of people who are watching this is probably going to be really small. I want to hear from you. You can find a link to my Instagram in the description. Send me a DM. Show me what you're making. I actually care. I really do. Go erase the world.